And this apocalyptic sight as we see it stretched by all engine running.
Laboratory Session. Hello again, it's Julius. As I've said last time, right now, I am in Canada, so I apologize for the bad resolution. Today, in Laboratory Tsushin, we will continue to talk about Z-Flex. In previous episodes, we have focused on writers of Z-Flex from the early 90s, the so-called third generation. In this episode, we will go back in time and take a look at the second generation writers from the 80s. We talked with George Wilson and asked what the team was like at the time. George's episodes were insightful and revealed many things we never knew about Z-Flex. All the stories about the product and logo development were stories only George would know because he was the team manager. Now, it's time to reveal the unknown parts of Z-Flex. Here we go.
Z のジョージ・ウィルソン。
Team manager was George Wilson.
George Wilson. George Wilson was the team manager at the time.
My name is George Wilson, and I wrote for Z-Flex starting in 1978, and I live in Los Angeles, California. I was born in Jacksonville, Florida. In 1965, my neighbors, their sister hung out with a bunch of older surfers, and they all had skateboards, like steel wheel skateboards, and I just kind of started skating with them, and then they used to come all the time, and then I just started riding their boards, and then it just went from there, you know what I mean? And I skated a lot through the 60s, but when it really took off was when the urethane wheel came out. I was a pro before I went to California, but there was a U.S. Open, and I believe it was in early 1978, and all the top pros came to Florida for this big U.S. Open, and that's where I met Jay and Tony and Shogo, and we all got arrested in a pool, for a backyard pool, and then Shogo had to stay in Florida for 3 months to go to court and stuff, and then he was talking to me. He said you should move out to California and all that, so I moved out. I came with Shogo in 1978. Let's see, Shogo, Dennis Agnew, who was Polar Bear, Marty Grimes, Jimmy Plumer, Jim Davey, Eric Anderson, who they called Froggy, and Solo Scott. That was the team at that time. When I first got on the team, those were all the riders. Z-Flex started was like in 1975. It was like the Z-Boys, the Zephyr team, and Jay Adams' father, Kent Sherwood, who started Z-Flex, he was making all the fiberglass boards for Zephyr. Kent started making board, and it was called EZ. So he was making the EZ board. He made another fiberglass board, and then from there, he started Z-Flex. There was two partners. It was Kent Sherwood, who was Jay's stepdad, and then Chris and Ethel Pass. They were partners. Planning, I believe they both did, but Chris was more the guy that was doing the wheels and all the urethane stuff, and then Kent was doing all the skateboards and all of that. But Kent invented the concave on the skateboard. That was one thing. Kent was like always coming up with like amazing, products and ideas, and like he was a master mold maker, and like a master with like fiberglass, and he was a early craftsman, and like he built sailboats and made surfboards and stuff like that in the 60s and stuff like that, early 70s. The guy that actually did the split Z like that and did the Circle Z and the Z-Flex with the split is the guy's name was Rene. He was a French guy, and I don't know the story exactly. I don't know if he came up with that, but he was the guy that did a lot of the art like that, the Circle Z, the Z-Flex, and he did the split Z like that. So, but that's like such a bold, beautiful, distinct logo for sure. It He was not a skater, no. He looked like a kind of a hippie rock and roll kind of guy. He was French, from France. Chris is French, so he was a friend of Chris's, so they came up with the logos. I was a rider from like 1978 to right around 1980, and then I quit skateboarding. I had a lot of really bad injuries, and too, by 1980 skateboarding was like kind of down, so I went back and started surfing. Z-Flex closed, and I think like towards the end of 79, 1980, skateboarding was dying anyway, but like Chris and Kent were having some problems with the partnership and all that, so it shut down. I think it was 83 or 84, I ran into Chris, and then Chris said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I had just been on a trip in Florida, and I just got back, and I go, "Oh, I just got back in town, I'm not doing anything." And he said, "Listen, I'm starting Z-Flex again, and you want to come and help me out?" And so then that was, I think it was 84, I can't remember, but so then I went and started kind of helping him and working with him, and then he showed me the Z-Roller, but it was a big one with the urethane on the, it was a really big, heavy one. Well, Z-Flex always, from the beginning, always did something a little different, like the fiberglass board, and then, they made some of the first, like the lapper things, and then before the rail slides, they started making these things called Z-Grab Air. They were smaller, but it to be grabbing, for airs, but they were urethane, so when people started, doing board sliding, like rock and roll slides, so that's when they came up with the sliding rail, and then they were making the tail blocks and stuff like that out of urethane. You know what I mean, with the screws in them, and then they started making the coper. So they had this material that slid good, and then they made a lapper out of that. So they were always coming up, and then Chris found the material to start doing the Z skins, and then he made one that would cover the whole bottom. So and it's like the Z groove too. I mean, they always came up with unique products, like the Z grooves, they were really fast, but they were too hard for me. I don't know, I wrote them, but I didn't write them a lot. So, some of it I think was, I'd always admire how they were always pushing to do something different, you know what I mean? So I think Z-Flex always did that, you know what I mean? They basically were in the very beginning of all the rails, and, they were pretty much ahead of, trying new things, you know what I mean? So how I became the team manager was like I told you, when I met Chris and he asked me to come and start working with him. So I started working with him, and there was no one. And at that time, I was doing everything. I was making about 30 boards at a time. I was hand making, so I knew how to do all the stuff. So at that time, I was making all the boards, like hand cutting them, screen printing them, spraying them. Then I started making new shapes and all that, and then I started kind of putting together, I said, "Chris, we need to get some people riding this stuff." So I just slowly started putting together, different guys, just like around the Venice area that ripped everything, like ramps, pools, and pipes and stuff like that. So skateboarding basically saved my life. When I was young, I had a tough childhood, and skateboarding saved my life. And I've always felt like skateboarding gives kids opportunities that if they maybe weren't skateboarding or say surfing, they may be, be in gangs or go to jail. Like people that had talent and maybe needed some help, you know what I mean? Like a lot of these guys, over the years now, I've been out of it for a long time, but all these guys have, they looked up, I didn't realize it, but so many of these kids, I was like a father to them, you know what I mean? A lot of these kids were from broken homes. Like I say, there was no design in that, and there wasn't anything, but it was more, and I think it was even, for me, It was more like how much skating helped my life. Like I always feel like if it wasn't for skateboarding, I don't know what would have happened, you know what I mean, with me. It became like a family, you know, and like so many of these guys over the years would reach out to me and say, you know, you were a father figure to me, and like, yeah, it's amazing. So, but it wasn't like a plan like that, you know what I mean? I didn't say I'm gonna build this diverse thing, and everything I've ever done is sort of like, it's organic, you know, it's not like, I'm not a big planner, was never with anything. It just sort of unfolded. We had a really good team, and those guys all skated like how we skated in the 70s. I don't know, it just kind of, it wasn't like a design. I maybe laid some groundwork, but these guys, you know, they just did their thing, and it was never a plan on what kind of guys to put on. But like I say, I think I always had a soft spot for guys that I see maybe needed help, you know what I mean? Because I knew what skateboarding did for me, and I knew that if they got in the right situation, that they would have a better opportunity at, not just in skateboarding, but as life goes on, you know? Like, I mean, you know, I've been manufacturing clothing. I mean, I've done a lot since I left Z-Flex. You know, I've been manufacturing clothing but everything I have and how I even got into that, it's all from skateboarding, you know what I mean? It's like, it was maybe a thing as far as I knew maybe I could give these guys a chance. They'd have a better chance in life, because, I mean, I think without it, a lot of these guys wouldn't have had a shot, you know what I mean?
Thank you to George again for sharing the stunning episodes of the 80s and 90s. It's true that many people don't accept skating, but it's also true that many people were saved by a skateboard. It's inspiring that skateboarding saved the Z-Flex team to not get involved in gang activity. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Have a nice rest of the year, and see you next time.